Hi, I'm Kerry Hecht. I'm the CEO and founder of 10K Humans. Saher.
And I'm Saher Khalid. I'm principal consultant at Nicholson Glover, and we're a recruitment agency that specializes in insight, strategy, and data.
That's great. So we've known each other for probably 3 years now. It was post-COVID for sure, right?
Yeah, one of the first post-COVID events, wasn't it? Because we all got sick.
That's right. And it was if I'm not mistaken, it was a London research club event, correct?
Yes, for Quirks and Martin Hill.
Oh yes, yeah. Martin Hill. Yeah. He's one of my besties. Yeah, I adore him. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. We are going to go through a list of questions that we worked on together. And I'm excited to get your perspective on what you're seeing in the job landscape, hiring landscape, skill landscape. So, and this one I really like, actually, this list of questions, because it is a lot more AI focused than some of the conversations that we've had before. And so I think that this is going to be a really interesting conversation, and we're all going to learn a lot. So starting with, what's the real talent picture right now? Demand versus actual AI expertise.
Yeah, I think this one is really interesting because the demand for AI expertise is definitely increasing. And where we've seen it traditionally in the tech and the SaaS world, that's now kind of spilling out into our world. And there's a big difference between having enthusiasm and excitement and having an AI mindset to having real, true technical expertise. And this is becoming a little bit more obvious now. It's also a little bit murky. So we were talking to some of my colleagues about this one as well, where because lots of clients and businesses are sort of jumping on that bandwagon, but they don't 100% know exactly what it is that they need.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a big difference between I'm using ChatGPT to facilitate some of my stuff to I'm using AI tools to, again, I'm like building and implementing AI products and machine learning. So
I'm kind of building on this a little bit more. Well, actually, I'm going to stick to the script because I think we get into this a little bit later. So when a client says AI experience, how do you translate that into a real brief? And I guess the build on that question I would have is, are you in a position where you're trying to help clients and hiring managers figure out what they're looking for? Like, so talk to me a little bit about all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, going back to the last one, there's definitely a shorter supply of this expertise, right? Like you see all those LinkedIn jokes of going 7 years of experience with this product that's only existed for 5 years, for example. But we probe, that's what we have to do. We just have to ask our clients the right questions. Sometimes people get caught up in the excitement and they've not heard those other ones or more difficult questions. So part of that can be unpacking it. I'd say sometimes businesses do know what it is that they need. It's just about how to communicate that into a hiring need and what that person will fulfill in a role, right? You know what your outcome is. You want to wow your clients. You want to make lots of money. You want to save lots of time for everybody, you know, all of the wonderful things, but it's about making that, you know, quite nuanced. So it's looking at, do you need or use AI as a tool? Do you need a data scientist? Are you building a product or using a product, or are you consulting on that? You know, and maybe it's a little bit of both. So again, the breadth of our roles at the moment are going all the way from platform management of self-serve to product development, all the way to machine learning and AI engineering. And so an insight agency, you know, they might use an AI tool to do some of their analysis a little bit faster, while a product company is literally, you know, building a whole algorithm, building a whole database infrastructure, and something that is going to replace an entire service.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me, because do you feel like more and more agencies or consumer insights departments are building their own tools? And is that, you know, are they tools that are meant to help with analysis, or are they potentially tools that are helping mine data, or like what are you seeing?
We're seeing a really good mix across the board. So I would say, I mean, like social listening tools was probably the most basic of where you can see that being used as like an analysis tool. And then you have things like CoLoop, shout out to those guys, where lots of insight agencies would use that internally, right? to facilitate analysis, to save a bit of time, but you would still need your consultants to do that kind of proof checking, right? And then you have other ones who are building their own products, and they either use that as part of their consultancy or that is their whole thing. So Qualify AI is a newer one that came out of Firefish. They are solving a problem, an industry problem, right? So it's an AI moderating tool. You can moderate and interview hundreds of people all over the world. Your researchers, your colleagues don't have to get up at 6 a.m. to moderate a focus group in Korea. And so that kind of solves a different challenge. And then you have other agencies like G=MC², for example, and they have their USP, they've got an AI imaging tool, and that is something that they use to inform their consulting and to inform how they carry out their research. So it's kind of underpinned by AI, but it has the human consulting element. So it has that kind of strategic lens over it.
That's interesting. And I think that, one of the things that's sort of the most novel about this is we've seen in our industry many times, huge disruptions when it comes to technology. But I feel like it is actually quite rare that it was quite rare up until this point where you would see agencies developing their own tools. Yeah. I think that's sort of a really interesting and unique thing, which is probably the biggest disruptor, right? So if you think about AI, and we've done similar things, right? So like we've built a whole back end workflow with AI, and I don't think that that's something that we would have even considered, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And it was funny because before we hit record on this, we were talking about, there's a difference between people, using ChatGPT to sort of vibe code things and then having the actual ability to understand the code. But when I decided that it was something that we were going to look into and explore, I sat down literally with ChatGPT and just started talking to it about whether this was possible, right? And ChatGPT kept asking me, would you like me to write the Python code for you? Would you like me to write the connector? Now, I knew it wasn't going to be right, but I knew it was proof of concept, that it was going to be right enough that I could take that, 11-page document or whatever it was and handed it to someone that knew what they were doing, that could say, look, I think this shows that it's possible. So now go build it. Right. Yeah. And that's what we did. Right. And that's not something that would have been possible to do or even have entered my mind a few years ago,
No, but you have that mindset as well, right? You have that mindset of, I have these amazing ideas. How can I make the impossible possible? And I feel like that's something that you've carried throughout your career. It's part of your mission for the industry itself, which is kind of why you're at this point and why you think of these things. And you built like there was an app that you built as well for chat and moderation, looking at how to include younger voices, those difficult to reach audiences. How can we incorporate them by thinking ahead? And and so your mindset is what drives that first. You know what to ask.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's called stupidly optimistic or naive, right? like
I love it.
Is possible, and then you realize, oh, maybe that was like a little less possible than I thought I was. But in this case, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. So what proves genuine AI capability? So like portfolio artifacts or tests tests your trust. So like, what are you seeing that makes you stop and pause, and what are you seeing that you're like, yeah, that's what we're looking for?
I think it goes down back to the client brief. So where I've been working on, and it's the nuggets that you get along the way, right? So if I hear that you're using ChatGPT, then okay, cool, you're in the right realms. But if I know that you're working with specific platforms, you are out there demoing, testing, lots of people internally have got all these AI task force. A lot of agencies have these, and they're out there, they're getting to know what's built from what. And the other thing with developing your own products is lots of products are white labeled. So what are the components of that? What's been built on what? And having that broad foundational understanding of the landscape, I think that puts you a step ahead. But it's also, proof is always in the pudding. So you get your tests, you have your hackathons, you have internal case studies. And so they're going to want to see, like, what is your depth? How much have you thought about this? What's your thinking like? What have you personally built? Were you there after a product was already big and it's already hit the market, or were you there through the ideation phase? And distinction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. And I think it's back to kind of the right tool for the right job, right? Even within the realm of easily available, easy to use AI tools, there are things that complete tasks significantly differently and significantly more effectively. And we came across one called I think it's N8N, and it's an AI tool that actually helps you pick the right tools for the job, and will then help write the code to get the different tools to interface themselves. So I mean, it is a pretty like wildly interesting time, and I do think that if you're a department head or a CEO of an agency, or you're a director of consumer insights, it really is beneficial to get as many demos as possible and to play with as many tools yourself, so that you aren't disconnected from the solutions that people are presenting to you, or that they're coming to your department or to your organizations. Like, it's really important to understand how the kids are doing it, so to speak. Yeah, and I think that I've always found that getting demos of new and exciting pieces of technology is invigorating, right? It's something that keeps me excited about our industry and keeps me excited about where we're going. So I think that's another benefit that you can have, if you're talking about how senior people stay engaged and involved in this stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And, under the market conditions, that's kind of what you want. And as researchers, you're always looking for new ideas, new methods. And I think that's just part and parcel of that.
Yeah, it is for sure. And I think that it's going to become increasingly important. Again, especially as so many, like you said, tools are white labeled, right? It's important also to know, I think, not just from what you are developing internally and what's possible with that, but what you're buying. If really all you're buying is, a reskinned version of something else, do you need to spend, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars or pounds on a subscription when you can just do it yourself with, a $4.99 a month,
Subscription.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I've had people turn around and say, look, we could take your money, but you're better off using these tools or these existing tools, because, it's just not worth that. So again, credit to how far things have come quite quickly, I think.
Yeah. And I think that it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think that is also a good place to determine partnerships, right? So when you've got a company that isn't going to take your money just for the sake of taking your money, those are the people that you want to be doing business with.
Yeah.
Okay, so how much SQL or Python is enough for my most insights roles today?
So for most insights roles, I think we had a little bit of an internal back and forth on this bit as well. So for insights roles, I think the general consensus is that you don't necessarily need as much expertise. It's more about knowing what's in the realm of possibility and telling everybody, so what? Okay, so this is what we've got. What does it mean? Understanding the value, what it can bring, and what it can tell you is important. But on the flip side, I think it's going to become more and more the norm. Technical proficiencies on researchers in general are just getting higher and higher. And when I speak to graduates, they're using SQL, they're using Python, they're using all of these things already. So they're coming out already with this basic level of proficiency. And I remember talking to somebody a while ago and saying, like Qualtrics back in the day, we were all using it at uni. And then before you know it, you start your new job and you're pestering them about this. And now everybody uses Qualtrics. And now writing a survey, push of a button, nobody even really worries too much about it anymore. And so I think that's increasing. We're seeing more and more roles where We're having strategy consultants and researchers that need to be able to model, code, and extract data from Python. Which is really interesting. And so, yeah, it's not going to be just about kind of dashboarding and pulling out and cleaning a bit of data and insights. I think over time, that's going to become quite the norm.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting to me because it's almost like the opposite of what you would expect to be happening, right? Because the tools are so much more robust than they used to. Your example of Qualtrics is a great one, right? That it's complicated to program in, and sometimes you're like, if we were just doing a drag and drop, survey creation or templated survey creation, we wouldn't need this, right?
Yeah.
And then we wouldn't need a bunch of programmers who are certified in Qualtrics programming or whatever. And so it's interesting to me because we and we'll talk more about some of the way people are learning and skills development and things like that later. But it's almost like there is a solution, an AI-based solution for every possible task at this point. Yet you're still seeing the need for some of these more advanced skills coming out of university. So is that kind of across the board, or are there very specific roles that still require that level of training?
That's a good question, actually. I would say probably less in consumer insight if I think about it. Yeah. Definitely in the strategy space, a lot in the political and social space. And I think that comes, and maybe even in pricing and transactions and things like that on the retail side of things as well. And that just comes down to being more specific, being more predictive, having more tangible outcomes, I think. And I think that's where the drive for that comes. COVID, where everybody thought they had their 20-year future mapped out, you had to go back to the drawing board, get all of your research, and they spent so much money doing that. They now just need small bits and pieces that AI can do in service that are going to fit the value, they're going to fit the budget, and they're going to be able to get you those granular outcomes without having to do these huge studies.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that too, because I've had a couple conversations where that has also been a point that has been called out, that taking a step back and thinking about research in these sort of smaller, more incremental and more iterative chunks versus the large scale ongoing studies that go over the course of years. Are you seeing less of those kinds of survey? Like, are less of those kinds of studies? Like, are people still looking for roles that can manage those, those research programs over years, or is that kind of dying down again a bit too?
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't think we get many quant roles where people are looking for tracker experience. People definitely have it. They're definitely winning trackers. They're definitely keeping the lights on for businesses. I would say it's not where candidates get excited either. It's not where they want to develop themselves long term. But I think in certain areas of research, it's effective and it adds a lot of value, and they can see that. But then you start thinking ahead, what can we do with all of this tracker data? Okay, then that's how you get your subscriptions and et cetera, et cetera. So where we've probably seen a bit more growth in syndicated is market intel after a really long time. And again, I think that goes back down to the fact that people want these increments of research.
Yeah, that is interesting, because again, you haven't heard much of syndicated research. I didn't even think about it until you said that, for quite a long time. But it's also, there was a period where we were talking about big data, and to some degree, syndicated sort of represents that on kind of a large commercial scale. But now, again, you can extract what you need from it, perhaps more quickly and more effectively, with the tools that are available.
With the tools, exactly. Yeah, I can imagine it's so much quicker, and you can customize it much easier without having to reset the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And even giving people the ability to interact with it kind of in their own time versus buying, in their own time and in their own way, without buying, a predetermined report, right? Okay, so senior roles feel more commercial. What KPIs are they actually on the hook for now?
Yes, this is interesting. So I think the first part I think is really important, just the fact that senior roles feel more commercial. I cannot tell you how many roles myself and my colleagues have had this year where we have had practitioner roles, go back to the drawing board midway through a process and change the job description and say it's going to be a commercial role now. We have practitioner roles that have commission structures attached to them to incentivize the revenue, whereas probably everybody had a revenue target at that level. And it is just all about the output, what numbers are on the board. And I think where you might not see those immediate results, then they are looking at your classic, how many meetings have you booked? What scheduled calls or demos might you have in? And I think an interesting shift, or something I'm hearing a bit more, maybe I didn't notice it as much beforehand, is that a lot of these like commission structures are tied to profit and gross margin. And so now your commercial output and awareness is directly linked to that. And so, yeah, it's not just the top of the funnel that now has to worry about those outcomes. You are incentivized or have to as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because as you're talking about this, it's almost like there's much more, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's more of a sales component than there was before. I mean, having worked at research agencies, of course, people are responsible for new business and bringing in new business and making sure that the business is profitable and that kind of thing. But it's not been as quite literally sales focused. So what's your advice to people who perhaps have been in the job market for a long time that find themselves looking for new roles about how to adapt their resumes or talk about the skills that they've had to make themselves more marketable?
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough market. I feel like lots of people genuinely are doing everything that they can, and it's about staying on top of that. But in terms of like their skills, it's highlighting how client-centric you are, your relationships, leadership is becoming quite important. I think that feeds into the training, that feeds into attrition, and different ways of working now. So highlighting a lot of those skills is important. And as and where you can, tying that to revenue, to figures, to growth, percentages, wherever you've been able to have impact and that you can kind of attach a tangible outcome. Yeah, I know people say it's the classic STAR method, but it just really helps drive it home. And I think when you think about it critically for yourself, you really start to remember all the really incredible things that you've done that you didn't realize were that incredible, but you just did it as part and parcel of your job. So it can be quite a nice exercise to do for yourself, especially when your confidence is probably not at the highest.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a really nice way to think about it. Okay, so juniors worry AI crowds out learning. How do employers keep real apprenticeship alive?
Yes, so it's a big one, isn't it? I think growth doesn't always happen at the same rate. And so at the same rate, we decide we're going to be investing in products and tools and AI and technology. We need to start investing in training and grassroots talent at the same time. And so that we're not playing catch up and doing it retrospectively, co-piloting things, shadowing each other, co-creations, blending some of the traditional with some of the modern. MRS is amazing for having some core courses and things like that to kind of get people along the way. But there's also a mindset element. Senior people in the industry, you can see the benefit and you know what's been, how it is and what's to come. But a lot of junior people in the industry are some of them are scared of an AI first environment because it means that they're not going to get to learn right off the bat. And so there's some reassurance, some confidence building, some education. We need to bridge that gap a little bit somehow because they're in that transition phase.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. And I mean, and one of the things that I keep thinking about is the skill gap, right? So you've got, or the skills that people have versus the skills that are necessary versus the skills that are valued. And you've got senior people who perhaps, in some cases, and I wouldn't say in all cases, I think there's a lot of people who are, at director level and above who are very excited about technology and very proficient in technology. But that some of the younger people who are coming out of school or perhaps have just finished like their first role don't understand the foundations. And so you've got, either the people at the top, people who are department heads who are maybe less technically savvy or perceived to be less technically savvy, but have the foundational skills versus junior people or younger people who are perceived as being more technologically advanced, even as the tools are coming, fast and furious, but don't have the foundational skill sets. And you need both. Right.
Yeah.
So I keep thinking that there's a lot more opportunity for cross collaboration. It kind of makes me think of like the Montessori way, right? That people should be teaching each other what it is that they're bringing to the table, because you still need both of these things.
Yeah, you need some kind of program where like people in their early careers get to like jump on other people's focus groups and things like that. There is definitely more collaboration. I think I noticed at the MRS Awards last year that there were more shared projects that won awards between multiple partners and suppliers than ever before. So yeah, I think definitely need some more collaboration on that front. Smaller agencies and outfits tend to do a bit better because the juniors can get thrown in, then you get to kind of spread yourself across a little bit more.
Yeah. Are you seeing so when we talk about the roles that are available to juniors, is there a component of their job description that is, and I've seen a couple of things like this where it's like you want an AI evangelist, right? And so you're hiring that person, and I don't think that's a bad thing, right? I just think that it's sort of interesting observationally that they obviously they want this person to come in so they can teach the rest of the team what it is that they know or what they think they know. What are you seeing things similar to that?
Yeah, I'm finding that a lot of juniors inside businesses are the ones that are being like on the AI task forces, or they're the ones that are expected to come in with that knowledge or come in and drive that incentive for AI stuff and be a little bit more excited about it. I think that's definitely a large component. And I think that obviously juniors don't know what they don't know yet, and so it can be maybe a little bit difficult to navigate. A lot of people in this industry, everyone in the industry is super intelligent. So when you've got these really ambitious graduates coming out from these really, difficult degrees in psychology or whatever it is that they've done, they're ready to stretch those muscles. And so you go in and kind of reduce or manage their expectations a little bit to go, maybe you're not going to be working on the super strategic questions that you thought, but this is the impact that you're going to be having, and this is what you're going to be able to drive. And it's just kind of changing that bit a little bit. Yeah.
How do you see that playing out over the next 5 years?
I think it was just going to create like a bit of a schism. So you will have some that will dig their heels in and they will continue forward in that consultancy space and want to be a little bit more traditional until things feel part and feel like normal tools that are integrated, and other people will just get really excited and drive that forward. The blend is where people are putting that all together.
Yeah, I think so. Where my question was kind of coming from is I was thinking about, especially in qualitative research, the amount of people that we do have from coming from backgrounds like psychology degrees and things like that, who are interested in, or anthropology degrees, who are interested in the human component of research. And of course, in quant, you've got, data scientists and statisticians and those kinds of things. And I wonder if our industry, and I really am just wondering this, right? I don't even have a theory on this at all, starts becoming less attractive if if that level of, if those skills are not necessarily as valued or as needed, because we are pointing, because there are more and more roles that are looking for scalability and speed and things like that.
Yeah, I'd say definitely a lot of pivoting. I don't know if that's because of a multitude of different reasons as well, but definitely pivoting. And you could probably see people doing that, pivoting into psychotherapy. I've seen quite a few people do that from research.
Yeah.
And other types of things. And then I think like you say, naturally it will probably change the type of talent that we attract in the future because the skill sets will change. Consultancy, I think a lot of people will try to pivot towards consultancy, where the thinking element in that is still definitely valued and is built on top of like the tech stack.
Yeah. I think that you're right. It's going to be an interesting few years to watch how this all kind of plays out.
Yeah.
But I mean, even when you're talking about the tools that are being built, if a person's role is to help teach the way that we are, teach the way that we're building the tools to mimic the way a person would be thinking about something as much as possible. I mean, that's sort of another area that probably hasn't been explored as much as it can or will be. Um, you know,
And like, even with moderation, for example, right, you could have all the will in the world to do all of the moderating, but if there's no demand for it, you're going to have to adapt. And just because you're not going to be doing the moderating yourself, and people didn't like it when we went from in-home to online, because they said we're going to lose so much of the nuances,
Yeah.
and the bits that you don't see in between. And it's all, I think the onus then becomes on leadership to teach you, okay, what do you read? What's the readability of that instead? How do you pick up the nuances? What do these things normally mean? What is it you normally look out for? And instead of being able to maybe physically witness it, you're just going to have to learn that information in a slightly different way. Maybe
Right.
it'll become a little bit more like measurable instead of going off your vibes and feelings.
Yeah, right. So you're learning how to extract it in a meaningful way. And yeah, I mean, I do remember this. This was probably definitely before you were you were doing what you were doing, but like when they first started to have bulletin boards and chat groups and things like that, and there was obviously a huge amount of concern that you were going to lose the body language and you were going to lose all of these things. And I say this a lot, but I think it's worth repeating that that shouldn't be a reason to not explore these new tools, because it does just become another tool in the toolbox. And there will always be a place for live research. There will always be a place for focus groups. There will always be a place for ethnographies. There will always be a place for those kinds of things. And, these tools will ultimately, or the different methodologies will ultimately be supportive of each other and run, at different phases on the same project. And it's going to be important to be able to be proficient in all of those and to know when to call on them.
Yeah, 100%. We're all chronically online anyway.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, it goes to the point too that it's you have to communicate with people in a way that is natural and native for them, not that it's natural and native for the researcher. I mean, one could make the argument that sitting around a conference table in the middle of the central business district is not a normal way that most people communicate about how well they like their shampoo or their razor or, those kinds of things. And so, and I remember when we initially, in order to combat that, it was living room setup. And I mean, that was not really, but 15, 20 years ago. And so if you think about where we are now versus like, we need to make this more natural, we need to put a couch in here,
It's true. And realistically, you watch an advert, you see the stat and you go, was it? And then you go on Reddit, because you trust that online forum more instead. And so it's the classroom changes, the participant room changes, and where people feel comfortable does. So we just have to keep adapting to that.
Yeah, I think that you just made such a good point too. I mean, if you think about the kind of tools like the social listening, right? That brands more than ever before not really responsible for their reputations or how people are using their products, or not in the same way. So people don't go to a manual book with their new lawnmower that they've purchased. They go look at a YouTube video to see how to use it. So anyway, okay. So what does an authentic AI first environment look like? Stack, culture, governance.
I think personally it starts with, I mean, all three things are very important. I think personally it starts with a good stack. I think you level that up, or you always have good governance as your framework, because that keeps you ethical, that keeps you above board, that keeps you at the front of innovation as well. And then you need the AI culture and environment, but that's kind of secondary, because lots of businesses can try to have an AI culture and environment, an AI first mindset. But if you don't have a tech or a product or AI at the heart of it, then it can't go much further than that, I don't think. I think you struggle to get beyond that. having AI first environments like Microsoft and Google, they famously have these, work on your own projects in your own time, like keep yourself invigorated and, keep yourself moving forward. And that's kind of what authentic AI looks like, I think.
So what, if you're thinking about like a consumer insights department or a consumer insights agency, what kind of structure do you see around this?
I'd say transparency, where you are openly working and encouraging people to use AI. You're encouraging different ways of sharing how you're using AI and how others can use it. And it's just something that's open, I think when things are crowded in cloak and daggers, it can make things seem, and it changes the whole thing. So then that feeds into your governance, right? You see on job applications, please use AI. We're happy for you to use AI. Just let us know how you used it, because that's really interesting to us. And so that is opening that, and it's creating the environment. It's inviting you to share, and then hopefully somebody else can learn along the way too.
Now, do your feelings change when people hand you resumes that were clearly written by AI?
No.
Okay, talk to me a little bit about that.
No, I don't mind. Yeah, if you've used AI to write your resume, then yeah, by all means, as long as it's got all the right stuff in there, and it's got and it hits all the right points, and it's true to your experience, then absolutely, yeah, I think you should. I'll take some meeting notes from a brief, and I'll put that into something to summarize it or something like that. So it can't make up something that you didn't do.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting, because some of the other conversations I've had around that topic have been very much like, well, I get to, I have a stack of resumes that I can tell when they were written by AI, or I'm plugging them into AI and asking it to filter out the ones that were written by AI. So it's funny, when you've got, I don't know, it just seems like a sort of interesting dilemma.
Yeah, I wonder what the motivation is to do that, because from a candidate experience, I can understand why, right? AI algorithms that are filtering everything, AI talent platforms that are doing all of these things. We've got databases that we use algorithms for. And even with LinkedIn Recruiter, I say it all the time, the amount of times that I don't get the notification or I don't see our application because it just didn't pop up, or it filtered you out for whatever reason and archived you. Yeah, I do get why people are using AI. They want to give themselves the best chance possible to get in front of a hiring manager, or for a human being to see their CV.
Yeah. I think that people want to make sure that you're still thinking about what you say. And so I guess maybe there is a distinct difference between using it so completely that you're not really checking for the right content, the right tone. Does it accurately reflect, who you are as an individual, versus, using it to be a supportive tool? But I guess that kind of, in a nutshell, captures the sort of problem all along. The whatever it is, like whatever you're using, if you're not proofing the work, if you're not checking it, if you're not making sure that it says the right thing in the right way, or is doing the right thing in the right way, then you're going to get called out on that.
Yeah, exactly. And look, some people are really good at talking about their experience and smashing it in an interview, but people really struggle with that first hurdle of writing a CV, and I get it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, sorry, I'm going to shift gears just a tiny bit. We're going to go off script. So like, if you had advice for people who were looking for work right now, how to make like a breakout resume, what would you see as something that is, because if you think about, much like the PowerPoint presentation, CVs have not changed very much, the format and what you're supposed to express on them. Since I've been alive, so I would think that now, with so many more tools available, you have the opportunity to bring yourself as a human to life. Like, what advice would you give people to have that breakout CV?
Yeah, mine might actually be the opposite. Other people might disagree with me. That's totally fine. I like a simple, boring CV. I think that's what stands out the best. I think readability is the number one important thing. I very rarely change the content of somebody's CV, but I will I will give you wider margins, and I will change the spacing a little bit on it, and I will make certain headers bigger, and that does more for your CV than anything. And having a skills section at the top, make sure you have your skills tab at the top. People don't spend that long reading your CV. People are going through lots of different CVs. If AI is going through your CV, it's looking for buzzwords. If HR is going through your CV, they're not a technical practitioner. They're also looking for buzzwords. And so give yourself the best opportunity. Put all of that at the top. I don't think personal profiles are always necessary. Sometimes they're helpful if you've got like non-linear experience, or you've done quite a lot of different things. So it's good to give a little summary. And I think when it comes to highlighting your experience, it's just highlighting what it is that you've done, short to the point bullet points, and highlighting in bold a couple of key things that you think are really impressive and can catch somebody's eye, like really old school. I think those are my top tips.
I think that's actually great, because you think about the way that a CV would normally be structured, and it's often like personal statement, job experience, education, and then skills, buried below the job that you had from, 2006 to 2003. So I like that. Thank you for deviating with me a little bit. Okay, so going back to the script, where do self-serve platforms end and AI-enabled consultancy begin, and who bridges that gap? I think this is one of those that's really, really important as agencies are evolving, and what clients are expecting from agencies involved. So this, and you had called out a couple companies before. I'd love to hear more about which ones you think are doing well in this space, if you're comfortable sharing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hope I don't get into trouble, because there are lots of amazing businesses that are doing it. Just the first ones that come to mind.
Yeah.
I think you guys bridge that gap as consultants, as researchers, strategists, specialists. And it comes down to your clients' time and value and their budgets. If clients have the time, they've got the internal teams, self-serve is great for there, but it can plug a hole, and it can plug a gap that they need for the time being. I know more and more consumer brands are trying to bring some of those things in-house a little bit so that they can do that.
Yep.
And so you get your faster turnaround, quick projects, but you're still continuing that relationship. But when you've got your larger scale projects, and it's going to take a longer time, the spend is much higher, lots of more stakeholders are involved, that's when you need and want, the consultancy element. That's when you want somebody that you can trust, someone that's going to take accountability, somebody that you can, could work as an extension of yourself. And that's what you'll really want. I find it interesting sometimes where people go from consultancy to entirely self-serve platform, because you've built a business with a client base that has a habit of coming to you with a budget for something they do not have time or capacity for.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And so to change that habit is the number one thing, because now you've got to train your clients on these new tools that they don't always have the uptake for.
Yeah, right. And if you're not adding any value to that, then why would they continue to use you, right? If you're truly just passing through work that's done from a self-serve tool, then you can do it yourself. And I think that there's a lot of upheaval and a lot of layoffs and things like that in our industry right now, and a lot of shrinking budgets and a lot of shrinking timelines. And I think that you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not continuing to add, of course, again, use the tools to make the process faster, better, get more value, for your clients. But if you're not putting your version of strategic thinking on top of it.
Yeah. And I think as businesses, we think a lot about that ourselves. We sometimes don't think about the fact that a brand is a brand and they just need the information that they need. And Behaviorally is a really good agency that blends this quite seamlessly from a messaging perspective, from a USP perspective, where they know what their niche is. They know they're in transactions, pricing, retail. They know they have some AI capabilities, and they do custom solutions. All they have done is they have productized their custom solutions. And so we know our clients come to us for 4 main things. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these in packages. So when Colgate or Reckitt comes, then we need to, they go, oh, we're trying to look at how well a packaging of something, or we want to know what the pricing outcome is going to be of this product. They just know specifically what package they can get into, and we don't have to sit and ideate all of these different things. And part of it might involve AI, part of it might involve surveys, part of it might go off and out of the script of this thing, but at least you have a really robust starting point and foundation point that is much easier to manage through an outbound sales team, a project team, a client management team, delivery, and then that kind of experience, I think.
Yeah, and they were actually one of the ones that were kind of first to the party too, which I think is sort of nice to see because you have an example of someone that is doing it well and has been around a while at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And then Qualify AI, because they've come out of Firefish, they operate slightly differently. So they've also productized their services, but they know that they have this amazing consultancy talent internally. So what they're trying to do is appeal to the masses. So yeah, if you want self-serve, we can do that for you, no problem. If you want a bit of guidance and you want us to help manage that, you can go for this. And if you want full-scale consultancy, then we have a full team that can kind of support and service that as well. And so then that way it's a clear proposition and you can kind of decide what level of insight you're going for.
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about too, as the agency models change, is the initial price point to get someone in the door, right? So, and with a model like you just described with Firefish, and of course we're big fans of the work that they do as well, if you can get someone in with something that doesn't cost $500,000 or $200,000, you might be able, then you can grow that relationship from a much more palatable starting point.
Yeah, 100%. And then you have the flip side of that, right? Like your system ones and your synthesios, where they started off with that good blend and balance, and then they went completely the other direction, and they are now completely SaaS enabled, and they have a team of commercial people and maybe some product and data people, but the consultancy element probably doesn't really exist as strongly anymore.
Yeah. I guess you are seeing but I guess that would be to be expected, right? That people are evolving, companies are evolving the way that they're following the money, right? In a way that makes sense for their organization. Okay, so agencies are niching down. What positioning cuts through for clients and candidates?
I'd say clarity and a niche. Clients and candidates want concise market positioning. Candidates are struggling with businesses that don't have clear guidance or direction. And as businesses are pivoting, it's natural that we're trying lots of different things and we're trying to figure out the best way forward. But in this type of job market, that's something that's very important. And clients want creative and flexible partners, people that can adapt to them. I think everybody feels like we're in this vibe of we feel like we're being sold to all the time. Yeah, we don't like that. And so businesses that are succeeding are making a play to kind of step into their own niche, to own what it is that they're doing. The Forge is a really good example of that. It's the direct to partner led business. They coined the term demand spaces. And so they've kind of carved out this niche for themselves and kind of can build and market their business off the back of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you are seeing a lot of us included too, right? So we had played in a bunch of different spaces, and then over the course of the past couple of years, really dialed back all the variety of options and gone back to our very core business.
Yeah, because if you get those opportunities, right, you have the capability to do it because you have the mind and and all of that. But in the meantime, at least let's make it, when you've got too many options on the menu, it can be difficult to pick.
Yeah, it's difficult to pick and difficult to execute from even, like the perspective of setting up the right structure internally, right? If you've got people going, and it's hard, I think, for people who are curious and do like to play, right? So it's like, because you're always wanting to play with new tools and new ideas, and what if we rework it this way? But then again, you can give not just your clients, but your staff with much. And
do you know what? It's interesting because it's also being reflected in the roles that we're hiring for. there is no generalist anything anymore.
Yeah, right.
Before you didn't have to be a category specialist. Even a couple of years ago, it was researchers, you're going to get up to speed because that's what you do, right? Your methodologies, it's transferable. Now that just doesn't cut it. They need you to come from what it is that they need. They want that direct experience. And so it's reflected both ways.
Yes, I can see that for sure, and we have definitely brought in external guidance at times as we are trying to flush different things out, right? And I think that is it's just to make sure that you're talking about it the right way, whether it is a role or a product, where you're just like, that you have the high potential for not getting it right. So you need to bring that expert energy in to help you focus, which is very different than how we were at the start of, when we first launched as Echo many moons ago. Okay, so clients want one-stop partners, which is always been that way, right?
Yes.
So where does that promise break, and how do teams avoid it?
I think one-stop partners that can focus on outcomes and rather than their processes and methods, that I think benefits well. The promises sometimes get a bit broken when your stakeholders are getting inundated with how you understand something and what you've done to get there rather than the outcome and the implications. And I think there's always a disconnect between agencies and clients. Agencies who feel like they do that, clients who feel like they're not always getting that. And I think the easiest way, maybe it's a bit basic, is that you can avoid it is just by following up, asking for feedback, doing the follow-ups, like making sure it doesn't just end when the project ends.
Yeah.
Really taking, and I know again, it might even sound super condescending, it doesn't mean to be at all, but really just taking the time to understand what it is that those clients want. Like you said, the true partner who can say, maybe we can't do exactly that, but this is what we could do instead, or this is a different way of trying to achieve the same outcome, Yeah, and
because this question actually can go in a couple different directions, can't it? So it's, you've got, perhaps a brief that started with one problem, and then more stakeholders get involved and a bunch of other little problems have been tacked onto it, and all of a sudden you've got bloat, which then starts driving bloat across the board, or you get nothing answered as clearly and effectively as you want, as opposed to if you're just trying to tack on a bunch of different things. And then you've got the model where and often agencies will look for vendors who can provide one-stop partner, whether it is encompassing the technology and research services around it. And then you've got certain vendors who will claim to do everything under the sun when they're actually using partners, but not, they're not being transparent about it. So I think that it's clarity across the board. So clarity with, what it is that you want, clarity, what your expectations are, what the outcome of the project is supposed to be from a deliverable standpoint, all the way down to what are you doing versus what are you bringing in people to help you with, and how that plays out in the way the work is going to flow and all of that kind of thing. So I think it really does encompass all stages of the project lifecycle.
Yeah, I find it interesting because when I started in recruitment and in research, I really thought that we were going to see the end of qual-quant teams, and that hasn't quite happened. And as the industry is becoming more method agnostic, your quant needs to be blended with qual and vice versa, demand spaces, ethnographies, using AI to do qual. Like it's not as segregated as it used to be. And so until businesses are able to blend those skill sets a bit more internally, so you're having these kind of T-shaped thinkers or well-rounded 360 researchers, I think they'll struggle to move past that for some businesses.
Yeah, well, and I think that you're right. So, I mean, it's funny because when you had mentioned before, generalists, right? Generalists often were people that were thought about to be familiar with lots of different kinds of methodologies. And you do still see some legacy silos, right, at some of the larger organizations, because it did used to be you had your qual team and your quant team, and often they wouldn't even connect when they shared a client about having a more holistic view. And I think that isn't so much the case now, but if you're thinking about, you still need to be a research generalist, but you definitely need to be more of a category specialist, right? If that's what you were implying before.
Yeah, definitely have to be more of a category specialist. I think over here, a lot of our clients still probably have qual quant teams, or they have those specialisms, those legacies upon which they were founded. Some agencies have got better at blending that as they've grown, but I think your fundamental mindset, some businesses will say, our quant research is qualitative in nature. So, and things like that. So I think it's that mindset, but it bleeds into the skill sets that you develop as well, and what you can offer then as a service to your clients.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And so, what are custom shops productizing well, and how do they avoid commoditization?
I think this is quite a tricky question, actually. I thought about this one a lot. And I think if I think about it, what people are doing well is productizing their time and services within a SaaS or AI framework, and just repackaging that up. And I think you avoid commoditization by becoming another outsourcing tool, right? And you operate as an extension. I think that's always the case. It's always been the case, no matter what phase of transformation the industry goes through. And by cutting through the noise, you're like solving problems, and that kind of helps you add true value. It helps you stay at the forefront of people's minds. It helps you become like the next verb and noun for the same thing that you're doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and that's right. Okay, and as we wrap up, so your quick advice: 3 moves for candidates this month, and 3 fixes for hiring managers.
Yes, so I kept this general rather than AI centric. I think 3 candidate moves would be: go to a networking event.
Yes.
Reach out to a hiring manager on LinkedIn and email of a specific business that you love. And send your CV to a couple of recruiters and ask them for a bit of feedback if you've been struggling to get those initial conversations going. And I'd say 3 fixes for hiring managers. I would say move quickly. People don't wait around forever. Resource planning to account for your notice period, so you're not under-resourced, and just staying human. I think it's tricky, it's murky. The market is calibrating and still shaking itself out, as is the AI landscape. So you just need to remember we're all human.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's great advice. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, as all of our conversations have been. And we'll talk soon.
Yes, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much for having me.